Hello and welcome to another episode of Jaxon Talks. Everybody, with me, your host, Jaxon Stone, and this is episode 97 of Jaxon Talks, everybody. Wow, we are inching closer to episode 100, which will be a special episode. It'll probably just me sitting on my couch talking about how much Jaxon Talks, everybody, has grown and how grateful I am for people that listen every single Tuesday when we drop a new episode. But before we get to episode 100, we're at episode 97. And I have a very special guest, a friend of mine, and someone actually who had played a part in the name Jaxon Stone. Everybody, we'll probably get to that story right off the bat. But I'm joined today by Seth Daughters. He's also a South Dakota State alumni, but he also has a master's degree in science, nutrition, and food science from South Dakota State. He also played football at South Dakota State University, and now he is a teacher. He teaches undergraduate and graduate exercise science programs. Does a little bit of strength and conditioning on the outside, but that's where his background is, playing in football, working in strength and conditioning, and now teaching undergraduate and graduate degrees, or students, excuse me. But Seth, welcome to the show, man. Happy to see you.
Thank you. Well, you said I was a special guest, so should I have waited to come on until the 100th episode, or now I kind of feel slighted?
No, you were very special. You're the most.
Okay.
I mean, I think you're the most special guest so far because you just told me that you wanted to be on the show, and then that was it. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Perfect. Okay. Well, then I'll make the exception.
Yeah. So, okay. Before I get to my first question, let's just let everyone know how you came up with the name Jaxon Stone. Everybody. I mean, you originated it.
I don't know if I was like the sole originator, but my recalling is, we'd both been done, playing sports, because we played sports around the same time. Then I was a grad assistant. You were in your final season. And then when I was a grad assistant, then you interned. So like we kind of had that athlete relationship, which I was thinking about that before too. Like we never hung out as athletes. Isn't that weird? But then I got thinking, like, for some reason at the time, it's different now, but some reason at the time, football and baseball never hung out.
Yeah, dude.
Ever.
Football and baseball had a very strange relationship. When I played there, like when I got to school at South Dakota State as a freshman, there was already like this thing between football and baseball. So I was like, okay, I have to fit in with my baseball guys. So I just have to like automatically not like the football guys, even though like by my senior year, like I was friends with a lot of the guys. I thought most of them were very cool.
Yeah, I never understood that.
And then me and you got along like swimmingly. And so, yeah, it was very strange. But anyways, keep going.
Yeah, so we've been done for like 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, and you were getting your start in professional wrestling, and I think we were back for Hobo Day, I believe, and we're texting back and forth, hey, where you at? Like, we're back in tailgate, hey, where you at? And I said, well, I'm over at this spot, and it was, I think what do they call themselves? Like the Chain Gang crew have a place set up, and they got like a big blue fence. So there's a picture of us. You might have to, like, maybe when you like put this together, you can pop that online or whatever, but yeah. We're like clapping hands over a fence or whatever. And I, for some reason, just turned to everybody and go, the Jaxon Stone, everybody. And well, that is my recollection of it. I know like you had like posted some stuff that way too. So I feel like maybe I was already like saying something that was maybe already put out there, but I was definitely the first person to like just publicly scream it to everybody. And so I felt pretty good about that.
I'm giving you the win here. I'm totally happy with you being the sole originator of that. And I'm also even more excited that it happened in South Dakota, in Brookings, South Dakota, like my favorite city of all time. So yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we'll chalk it up to all of those good things happening all at once, and then boom, there it is.
For sure. Yeah, it's a great place to be, great people. But it was just fun. It was just my memory. And then I remember I every like twice a year, I'd be like, hey, just remember where that name comes from. Like, just remember.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then you're like, and then I should come on your podcast and talk about strength and conditioning. And here we are. That's exactly what we're going to talk about.
That's right, for sure.
But before we get into that, the meat and bones, I have a very important question to ask you, Seth. You have a lot going on. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a teacher, life, right? So I think this question is very important. You probably get asked all the time in passing, maybe from your students, maybe from colleagues, and maybe you don't answer it honestly because you don't have time. There's not enough space. You're busy, right? But now I want to give you the time and the space to answer the question. And so, Seth, like, how are you doing? Like, really, for real, for real.
I knew this was the question you're going to ask. just from watching your past episodes. And so honestly, I was probably the most nervous about this question. I was like, geez, like, how am I how am I supposed to answer, right? Like you said, like, you get asked it, somebody should take a poll. I don't know how many times a day a person gets asked, how you doing, or how's it going, that type of thing. And we usually just do brush it off. We say, oh, it's good, I'm doing good, or in passing, it's more of just kind of just the culture, right? Like, you just say it in passing, even if you don't get an answer maybe. So I was kind of like, geez, I don't know how I'm going to answer that question. Most of the time I answer, because I feel like I'm fairly optimistic and upbeat. I just tell people, hey, I'm doing good, doing great. Like, how you doing? I have noticed myself, and you're well aware of this, when you're in kind of a field of, exercise, strength conditioning, education, where you're teaching people and you understand that you have to build relationships with people, that you kind of turn the question back on them probably before you answer it. I feel like I do that a lot, like, I give them the, oh, I'm good, and then I ask the question back, and I generally do try to talk to them or get to know them, or prompt an answer, much like what you're trying to prompt from me. And so when I was thinking about that, I'm like, geez, like, I expect that answer when I talk to other people, but I never really truly give my answer. So how am I doing today? How have I been doing? Good. It would be the general overview. The deep into that is, life is not easy, right? Life is, there's areas that you love, there's areas that you don't love, and it ebbs and flows. And kind of goes back to sports, where if it was, easy, everybody would do it, type thing. But no, I'm good, but life's a juggle. Life is a dance, a delicate dance in balancing, work, home life, relationships, relationships with your spouse, your kids, your colleagues, the people that you serve, the students that you serve, and you try to give the best answer that you can at all times. But it can be a struggle. It can be hard. And I'm as guilty as, knowing kind of, your path and what your passions are now. I'm as guilty as anybody in saying that I don't reach out. I don't reach out to, really truly express how I'm doing, or tell people how I'm doing, or take a load off, right? And I know that sometimes carries over into a lot of the things that I do at home or in my job, not in a bad way where, it differs the person that I am, or the makes my attitude poor or anything, but, I struggle to just get stuff off my chest, or explain a situation, or explain my side, or whatever. But something that I think, and I know you're a big promoter of, is, you can't put that wall in front of you and just think, I'm a, if you go back when I was a football player, I'm a football player, like, you can't express how you feel, or you're an athlete, you can't express how you truly feel, or what your motives are, or what you're doing, or those sort of things. I think that wall needs to be removed. And that's one area that, probably over the last 5-6 years, I feel like I've been trying to figure out a way to do, which is hard when you identify, early on as an athlete, or as somebody that kind of has that mantra of like, oh, don't express your feelings. So, that's one area that I've been working on, especially since I've had kids. I think that's a big, that really takes down that barrier. It definitely made me a more sensitive person in a good way. It kind of brought me back to the thought of, like, your time is precious, and your time is precious in the fact that if you don't express yourself within that time, then you're wasting it, that kind of situation. And it's one of those deals where you don't probably, well, how do I want to say it? You don't understand time as much when you're younger, like the essence of time, as you do when you're finally, working, or you get married, or you have kids, or you're living life outside of kind of what you maybe first identified with, whether that's school or football. So that's been interesting, because I think about that a lot. It's like, you just don't have enough time in the day, right? Like, you got time for work and your family and, whatever else you're passionate about. And then it's like, man, we're like, if I want to do one more thing, where do I fit that in? Right. And that's really hard. So I've started to dwell on that a lot more for the fact that you just realize the lack of time. And then you realize that if you're not fully present or you're not fully expressing yourself in every situation, then that's a waste of your time. And so, to give you the short answer, I'm good. To give you that long explanation of where I kind of came to that answer, knowing you were going to ask it, it's an area that I think, myself included, I need to express myself more, just how I'm feeling on a daily basis. Reach out to friends. You're an exception. I try to reach out to you a couple times a year, to say, how's it going? Or we talk, text, Facebook, whatever it might be. But I don't do that near enough. And I don't reach out to people and just have that, deep conversation, and something I need to do more of for sure.
What about those kinds of conversations with your wife? I imagine you guys have those.
Yeah. She'd probably tell you that it's hard to get it out of me. But we try to. Obviously you have to, and to make marriages work. But I nor her, neither of us will, tell you that we're perfect, and something I think you got to continue to work on probably as you go through marriage, and as your marriage moves forward, continue to get better at. And that's one area I know I need to get better at for sure, right? Just to have those conversations and on a deeper level for sure. So you bet.
Well, thanks for sharing. That was a lovely, lovely answer.
You bet. I did good, right? I spent a lot of time going, oh boy, how am I going to answer? So no, good.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you. So that's all I got prepared. So
sounds good. We'll see you on episode 100.
Yeah. And I'll ask you the same question, then we'll go from there. But no, yeah, that's interesting. I think about time a lot as well. Like, what do I actually have time for? What's a priority for me? Would I rather spend my time doing this or this? Does it line up with my core values? Is it going to lead me towards a higher goal or a higher purpose? All of those things. And then knowing the time that I may not have left with the people that I love also, because all of our loved ones do unfortunately pass away and die, and those relationships come to an end, and you never really know when that's going to happen. And so that's another time variable that you kind of don't want to waste. But it's hard to always think about that, because if you're always thinking about that, then you're not in the present moment with the people that you're with. So it kind of has to be this like natural unconscious thing that you're like planted in the ground where your feet are, trying to do the best you can in the situation that you have with the time and the people that you have. And so it kind of has to be this backtrack of work that you're doing, so that when you do get in these moments that you want to be present, you're not thinking about trying to be present, you're just actually being present. And so that's very complicated. I read a book basically kind of describing all of that in a lot of words, but I think about it a lot. I think about my relationships with people, and and so that's interesting comment about all of that. But speaking of your relationship with like your wife, and that being, probably the most important relationship you have, maybe outside of your kids, of course. Has there anything like specifically that relationship has taught you about yourself that you're proud of, that you've learned or that you've grown through?
Oh, what have I learned? I mean, you learn stuff every day. I think probably the biggest thing is just balancing your needs, her needs, right? She's a very outspoken person. I'm a very, not introvert, but I keep stuff to myself. So I've learned that, to continue to express myself and to continue to talk or whatever. I think you learn, a lot of things together as a team, right? Like, I feel like, you learn like, hey, we make a great team. We make great parents, right? Like, you learn to balance that, much like you would on a team that you were part of in baseball or football. And so you learn areas of strengths and weaknesses, and, how she balances me out, hopefully I balance her out. And so, she's kind of the dreamer, I guess, if you will. Like, if we're going to go on, like a vacation, like she's going to make me go on that vacation, right? Like where I'm going to kind of be like, and I don't, is it worth our time? Is it worth our money or whatever that might be? When, deep down, I know it's, getting away or disconnecting from the world for a little bit is going to benefit me, and just spending time with her, quality time with her and or the kids or both. And then, just getting away from work and getting away from people and just kind of resetting. So we balance each other out that way well. And I think you just learn, how to do that better every day. No, my wife is great. I gotta give her a shout out. She balances pretty much all of my weaknesses out 100%, 110%, and makes me a better person for sure.
Yeah, I relate to that in a way because I'm now in a very committed, very serious relationship. It's the first one I've been in like that I feel this way ever, right? And so you talk about, I talk to my friends, like close friends who are married, some of them like Al, he's getting married in August. And you're just talking about like, how do you know? Like, how do you know you're in love? How do you know this is the person? And every time I would ask one of my friends that, it would be the same answer, like you just know. And like for someone who had never felt that way, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like you have to know, like there has to be something. And then I'm like, I found this girl, her name is Rihanna. And one day I just woke up and I was like, oh, okay, I know. Yeah, like this is it, I guess. Like I know. And and like just like you said, right? She does this, like she balances out, my weaknesses. She makes me better. She makes my life better. And you just have this like knowing. And then you're like thinking about like what our relationship could potentially be like in 20, 30, 40 years. And like, wow, how much different are we going to be? How much are we going to learn about each other? How much are we going to experience together? Like that seems so wickedly cool. Also, I mean, very scary. It does.
Sure.
Scary, but most good things come, despite all of the fear that comes with it. And so, yeah, amazing.
For sure.
Like it's just amazing to have like someone that you feel like you can always rely on all of the time.
For sure.
That's incredible, I think.
Yeah, it has your back at all, twists and turns and changes in life. I think for us, it was just as young parents or just young people in our career field, like there's just a lot of changes that happen, I'm assuming probably all throughout your life, but it just seems like there are early in life just because you change careers. I changed a career and she hasn't really changed careers, but she's had some switches within her work, and then obviously having kids and whatnot. I think that's where you build the most trust in one another, is just the support through all those changes and whatnot.
Yeah, magical, man. Cheers to you guys, and cheers to her.
Yeah, you too, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's really incredible. But we'll kind of flip the switch a little bit. We'll kind of flip subjects a little bit and talk about kind of leading to where you are now from starting with your football career. But I really want to know, like, because we mesh obviously in the fitness, exercise, workout, like both of that stuff is like wickedly important to us. Like that's been part of my life since I was 15 and it hasn't changed. Like I have to get a daily workout in, whether it be anything, walking, running, yoga, jujitsu, Krav, something to move and honor my body. So when did that become like a really important part of your life?
Probably around the same age. I don't know, eighth, ninth grade. So I don't know, what are you, 12, 13 then? Are you 15 by ninth grade, I guess?
Yeah, seventh grade, you're 13.
13, okay. So probably, end of eighth grade year, freshman year. Our school, very small, rural South Dakota. Our coaches ran a summer strength and conditioning program. And at the time, you probably, you don't realize, obviously, I know you don't, as an athlete that young, like why or what you're doing it. Your parents just sign you up for it. And you know that the head football coach is running it. And so if you want to play football, you better be there. But I have vivid memory, I fail to like remember, like people talk about high school sometimes, or even college, like with this vivid detail. And I'm like, man, I don't remember 95% of, situations or what happened, or just high school, college in general. I don't know why that is, but there are very distinct things that you do remember. And I remember very distinctly whether I was an eighth or ninth grader, the first time in the weight room and in the weight room with like older guys that were training. And it probably wasn't the best program. And to be honest, I couldn't even remember what we do, but I remember being in the weight room on a hammer jammer and the seniors like playing 500 miles, or I would walk 500 miles, that I can't remember who even sings the song. So that song and Jesse's Girl, in like the 90s or 80s or whatever. So a couple of those songs, and that was very vivid in my memory and must have had an impact because, there shortly after you start taking it more seriously and you continue to lift and you continue to see where that helps and builds your body. Probably, to be honest, I don't know that I even really saw this at the time, the transition of, this is helping me on the field, other than the fact that I was pleasing a coach. If that makes sense. But I enjoyed being in there, and I didn't really even know I enjoyed being in there, and really didn't have that recollection until probably senior year of college, when I started to kind of think back, okay, well, I'm getting into strength conditioning. I'm potentially wanting to be a strength conditioning coach at the collegiate level. Like, where did this all start for me? You listen to podcasts and people say, well, it started when I was in 6th grade and the coach like taught me how to, move correctly. And so I was like, well, where did that start for me? And it started probably sophomore year or junior year, one of those two. The football coach was down a coach to help run the program, right? And so he asked if I would come in and help run the younger kids through some of the sprinter agility or whatever some of those workouts were at the time. I can't remember exactly. And so I did that during the summer, and I'd just help off and on, and then I'd get my lift in. And then my first year back from SDSU, I didn't stay for the summer. I went back home, and I literally was paid to open the weight room from 6 to 9 p.m. And then I also helped at a summer acceleration camp. And at the time, I didn't know that I wanted to be a strength coach yet. But I was like, man, I've loved being in the weight room. I've loved helping, kids move properly. I've loved kind of just being in that sports performance realm, even though I didn't know what it was. And it just kind of stemmed from there, So I don't know that I have like a one instance of like, I finally made the realization that this helped me, other than that was kind of an escape for me, I guess, if you will. And I loved being in there without really knowing why I loved being there. And then it just kind of kept building into the next thing. That kind of built into the next thing in my career, I guess. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
To follow up on that, where that kind of goes from there, then I get in the exercise science program. I was initially a HPER or hyper physical education, teacher education, and exercise science. I told myself I was going to double major.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, for like a semester. And then I quickly found out that the hours requirements, that wasn't going to work.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot, man.
With trying to figure out how to teach and student teach and whatnot. So I had to kind of choose one over the other. Initially, I thought I was going to just be a high school coach, and maybe do some stuff in the weight room, because I probably didn't even at the time really know that like strength conditioning coaches were a thing. Like, they weren't a thing in my high school. So I didn't really even know that was a career until I kind of got with Coach Mo.
Right. Because at South Dakota State, we only had one.
Correct. Yeah. And then Eric came on, we had some GAs, Coach Mo, and then Eric was kind of the first time full-time assistant, maybe.
That's wild to think about, that we had one coach. We have every sport. There's every sport at South Dakota State, and all of them are Division I.
Right.
And we had one guy who was basically trying to teach people how to lift, run, and exercise properly geared to their specific sport. That's so and then I think it was like we had grad assistants, sure, but that's not like a hired full-time coach. They're doing work. They have school work to do also. They're not full-time.
Yep.
And then I think it was I knew Eric my freshman year, and then I think it was like my sophomore, junior year, he was a full-time coach.
Yep. Brad, you might have had Brad Schmidt as well too. He would have been the first full-time, I think, with Coach Mo, and then Eric might have been the second that they had too. I can't speak for sure, but yeah, it was
something like that. Yeah.
To balance all of that, obviously SDSU has come a long way since then, but just to know that the progress and what Coach Mo was able to do with the resources that he had with training, like you said, at that time, I think we've backed off. Like SDSU doesn't have all the teams that they had back then. They got tennis is no more. Trying to think of the other ones, but there's a few less. But the fact that they had, the 20 some varsity sports that you can have at a collegiate level, and to do that successfully and be able to help the program get to where it is today is like, it's mind boggling. It's mind boggling.
Yeah. So Coach Mo's going to be on this podcast for sure. That dude's a legend.
Yeah, he'd be. So to let you know, he has stepped away from strength conditioning, and he's working in construction management right now too. But I'm sure he would love to come talk about life and his career path and stuff too. I think that'd be a great podcast for sure.
Yeah, Coach Mo, shout out. All right, so you found Coach Mo. We'll go back to the story quick.
Yeah, well, so found Coach Mo, but even to preface before that, so understanding that just, one, I was enjoying being in the weight room, not necessarily seeing that it was probably helping my performance, although it was. I mean, I just wasn't, cognizant to that. But then I had some injuries. I tore my ACL. I had some cartilage as a sophomore and did some rehab. So I was, around some athletic trainers. Tore my ACL as a senior in high school, and was again working with some athletic trainers. Long story short, get back into football, continue to play. I tear my other ACL my junior season at SDSU, and do the PT, the AT, and then as soon as I can, I was back with Coach Mo, and kind of that return to play or getting ready to come back on the field. I was spending a lot of time with him in the weight room, and kind of talking about exercise science and like what I was in it for, like why are you doing exercise science? What do you want to do with it? And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe be an AT. And he's like, well, your thought of strength conditioning. And I was like, is that a career path? Like I didn't even know how to get there, right? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you get there? Is that a thing? So just with a lot of conversations with him and working with him kind of more or less one-on-one through that rehab, talked about his route and where he came from as, interning in the field and a graduate assistantship at Texas, working his way through the field, decided that, yeah, like strength conditioning is what I like to do. Obviously I'm injured all the time, so I must like to do it, but no. And then, so through that conversation and then probably connecting the dots that, hey, I'd already kind of been somewhat doing that. Not really knowing that I was doing that, helping out with our high school program, opening the weight room my first year back, to get my lift. It was more selfish than anything to get my lift in because I needed the weight room open, but then other kids would come in there that were back for the summer, or some high school kid. I don't think any high school kids would come in, but a lot of the guys that I graduated with or that were a year or two younger than me would come back and lift, and then some of the community members would come in and lift. I believe it was through our quarterbacks club is who promoted it. But so connecting those dots, I was like, geez, I've been doing this already, like in some degree, or like had interest in this without knowing, so I might as well at least pursue it. So exercise science undergrad, at the end of our exercise science undergrad, we needed a 350-hour field experience internship, which I coordinate now, which is kind of cool connecting those dots. But I did that internship with Coach Mo. Absolutely loved it, fell in love with strength conditioning, the whole nerded out on all the information that was fed to me, loved programming, although I had no idea how to do it at the time, like thought I knew how to do it. So it was fun to at least, pretend at that time when you're like, oh, like I'm getting all this information, let's put it on paper, let's try it out. And then applied for our graduate assistantship with Coach Mo, and was fortunate enough to get that with him and his staff. And then I did my master's degree here in our exercise, nutrition and food sciences program at SDSU, and worked with primarily, I shouldn't say primarily, but my teams that I were responsible for was men and women swim and dive and softball. And then I assisted with all the other coaches, floor hours for their teams. So football, baseball at the time when you were still playing, basketball, didn't do much with track and field, a little bit with soccer, and more or less just being another set of eyes, another coach. But then seeing them coaches program and why they programmed their sport the way they did, and then talking shop and figuring out why they were doing certain things with their athletes obviously helps you grow as a coach too. So did that. Was there 2 years. I was trying to get my master's program done in a year and a half. So I did a thesis, and I did some research on the football team and the amount of muscle that they lose during a season, and if they gain that back in the off season. That's a whole other conversation to have. But what we found was that they were losing a lot of weight during the season. I shouldn't say a lot, but a considerable amount of weight that is enough to justify the reduction in performance, and they weren't gaining anything above that the next season. So they were basically getting back to baseline or what they were the previous season. So anyway, did my thesis, completed that, and defended it in November, and then started teaching a class because I still had to finish my graduate assistantship that spring, and then started teaching a strength conditioning course in our master's program, or in our undergraduate program, as a master's student. And I really love that. And I'll come back around here in a minute, but loved teaching that. Finished out my graduate assistantship, started applying for some strength coach jobs at various colleges, many of which I didn't even get a phone call back or like an interview or whatnot. Some I did. You do the interview, they don't call you back, or you're like, I don't know if this is the right fit. So really nothing that panned out from a college strength conditioning position, but that was okay because I wanted to finish graduate assistantship, and then reapply when those open up again, either in May or how that whole system works. But in the meantime, got into contact with a couple guys I know in Sioux Falls who work for the Orthopedic Institute, and we're starting a facility, a performance facility that was in conjunction with the Orthopedic Institute. At the time, it was called D1 Sports Training. It was a franchise from Nashville, Tennessee. And they asked if I wanted to come be a strength coach in the private sector, which again, I really didn't even know was a thing. You see, personal training and group fit and whatnot, but didn't really know that you could do, essentially strength conditioning as its setting in the college realm, but for high school students, for some Gen Pop, special populations, but in a facility that much resembles essentially a college weight room and a college strength conditioning program. And so really without having a job lined up, finishing grad school, that opportunity was very intriguing to help start something from the ground up. And so decided to move to Sioux Falls. It worked out with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, shortly after became my fiance, but she was going to nursing school in Sioux Falls. So just kind of all the pieces seemed to fall where they may, and then moved to Sioux Falls and worked in the private sector for, what would it be, about 7 years, I think, working with high school athletes, middle school athletes, kids as young as 6, adults as old as 80, general pop. I mean, really anything outside of really anything in strength conditioning, I got the chance to work with. Still worked with college athletes that would come back to Sioux Falls from their college during the summer. Some professional athletes that had connections to Sioux Falls or Brookings or pro day type stuff. So got to train them for pro days, or if they were back during different off-season type training periods or whatnot. And was there till the spring of 2020, and then left that position for opportunity in teaching, which as I was kind of progressing through my career, had a love for teaching, and I was teaching coaches at the facility I worked at. I was teaching interns and kind of wanted to take a step into that side. And so there was some opportunity in teaching. Well, I leave in February of 2020, and then COVID hits. And I'm adjuncting a course at that time. And fortunately, had an opportunity to come to SDSU full-time that following December. And so I adjuncted some more classes to kind of get my foot in the door a little bit more. And they had a need for an instructor with a master's level degree to instruct a majority of the undergrad classes for our exercise science program. And so that got me up here. I've been full-time for about a year and a half now, but I've been teaching for 8-ish years. So I've been developing and kind of transitioned into that I always kind of had a love, and every spring I taught that one course. I was like, oh, I love teaching this class. And then, the more people you teach, the more people you want to teach how to do stuff the right way, and to have them go out and help people do stuff the right way in the fitness or exercise or strength conditioning world. So kind of just stemmed from there, and now here I am. So now I'm currently an instructor at SDSU, and then I coordinate our field experiences. So I help students find, the field experience that's going to most benefit them as a student with their career paths and their chosen career paths. And then I teach primarily our undergraduates, but then I also teach an advanced strength conditioning course in our graduate program too. So helping people that are in that strength conditioning or fitness exercise science side learn a little bit more about program design and some of the higher level attributes to things you need to know to be a successful coach, monitor athletes, those sort of things. So
beautiful. Okay, we got to flush out like some definitions here so people know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Definition number one: most people don't know what a strength and conditioning coach is or what that does. Could you explain?
For sure. Yeah. Okay. So I kind of look at it in like tiers, and I'm not looking at it in tiers to make one profession seem better than the other. It's just the general flow of your positions within, I'll call it strength conditioning as a whole, or fitness as a whole. As a strength conditioning coach, you typically have at either like a collegiate level is probably where most people know strength conditioning, where that strength conditioning coach is going to teach their athletes how to improve their performance. So lifting weights, resistance training, but it also includes movement specific drills such as improving sprint mechanics and speed, agility mechanics and ability, jumping, power. I mean, the list could go on and on, really. But essentially, they're the point person for developing the programs that then the athletes will adhere to during all various parts of their season. So strength conditioning at its essence is essentially teaching people to move, to lift, resistance train, to really benefit their conditioning level from a performance standpoint. And so the tier system that I kind of talk about is more how I think about it in my mind. And like I said, it's not that one career is better than the other or that there's a standard, but I kind of look at it as if you're looking at how you get to these positions, your college strength and conditioning coach kind of sits at the top. Meaning you can go from a college strength conditioning coach and work in a lot of various other fields, having been at that level, right? Then the next tier is kind of your high school strength conditioning / private fitness, dependent on the setting, where you're probably working with high school athletes in a similar fashion. You're improving their performance, you're improving their strength, their power, doing something to improve their improve them in their field of play. Where I say private is you're still working with high school strength conditioning, but it's probably in your own facility or a facility that's, mine was owned by the Orthopedic Institute, which is a sports medicine provider in Sioux Falls, and has a known name for improving sport performance through some of the various AT-PT activities that they do. And it's a lot harder if you start there to get back to college strength conditioning. So that's kind of the tier system. And it's more based off of if you come out of college with that degree, and it's a great field and it's a very big field and it's an improving field. But if you're just to come out as a strength coach in the high school or private setting, you probably haven't gone through the graduate assistantship. You probably haven't gone through the internship to get to a college strength conditioning coach. So it's a little harder to climb that specific career path ladder. Under that, and again, I'm not putting this in, I wanted to highly stress because there's successful careers in all of these. But under that, you can kind of look at like personal training, group fitness, health coaching, wellness coaching in kind of its own category, where it's a little bit harder to just go from having maybe a successful career in that to go to the next job, if that makes sense, without taking the necessary kind of like academic steps, if that makes sense. Now, some people do it and they get there just by who they know and what they know and those sort of things. But it's generally harder if you kind of start like at that level. And so they're still all essentially doing the same thing, right? Like you're still, I still, even though I was in the private sector, I still worked with men and women of various ages to increase their general fitness, from cardiovascular training to help somebody lose weight, to helping somebody lose weight, but also get stronger, right? To helping older individuals increase their activities of daily living, right? If somebody's having trouble going up a flight of stairs and you focus on some lower body strength training activities, ideally you're trying to help them go up that flight of stairs much easier. Or individual that struggles to sit into their car, like things where you can help increase somebody's strength for those daily activities. And that's happening at every level, whether you're college, high school, private, PT, group fitness, wellness coach. I just view that in my mind just because of some of the routes that you have to go if you want, essentially like a strength conditioning job at the collegiate level. You kind of got to start there first. But what you see a lot of is some strength conditioning coaches at the collegiate level will then go into the high school, the private or personal training. And so it's just an easier flow at that degree level, I guess, is probably what I'm getting at, to go to those other positions versus from PT wellness coaching back to strength coaching. So.
And then when you talk about program design or programming, what does that specifically mean?
For sure. Well, it means a lot of different things, as you know, dependent on how you want to design your program. But essentially what you're doing is dependent on the person that you're working with. You're looking at their goals and needs. And so some of the things I teach within our program is you put together a needs analysis. What does this person need? What is their goals? What are they competent at a fitness level? Like what can they do, right? What maybe can't they do if they've had injury or if they have some limitations? And then based on those needs, you put together a program, and it could be of various lengths. So if you're working with a college softball program or baseball program, you're going to have some sort of program design 12 months out of the year, meaning you are designing the resistance training, the sprint, the agility, the plyometric work that they're doing for 12 months out of the year. Where that changes a little bit is if you're in the private sector or a personal trainer, is some people may be with you for a year, some people may be with you for 12 weeks. And so you're designing the training that they're going to go through for whatever predetermined amount of time that might be. And so on a more like intricate level, you're designing what they're doing each day. Maybe they're going 3 days a week. So you're designing what those workouts look like 3 days per week, let's just say for 12 weeks, to improve whatever component it is that they are wanting to improve. So if I came to you and I wanted to, lose 20 pounds, but also wanted to get stronger, there would be components of strength, hypertrophy, meaning that you're building muscle. There would be components of probably cardiovascular and general fitness training, where you're doing more of the aerobic side to help that person lose some of that body fat and that body weight. And so you're putting those days together to best benefit that person so that they can train 3 days a week. And I mean, you could put that number up to 6 or 7, depending on your situation. If you're a bodybuilder and you're trying to gain as much muscle as you want, you're going to need to train 6 days a week. Like there's just no way around it. And so it's just based off of a person's goals. You're putting together what they are doing within that training session for whatever predetermined amount of time that might be.
And so then when you start working with teams, that becomes a bit challenging because, right, there's a specific movement pattern for that sport that you're trying to improve, right? But you can't really make an individualized workout for every single athlete on that team. And so how do you kind of work through that as a strength and conditioning coach?
For sure. Yeah. And that is one of the hardest things, because there's one of the big key principles in strength conditioning is the principle of individualization, right? And so obviously if you can have somebody in a one-on-one, that becomes more specific to their needs. But in a large team setting, now it kind of turns into, well, what are the common sites of injury for baseball? What are the specific needs to baseball? And where it becomes even more increasingly difficult is you have to go, well, there's different needs for an outfielder than there is a catcher or a pitcher or even an infielder. And so a couple of different ways you can go about it. Some people are better at it than others. Some people will tell you that there's no sport specificity or individualization, and so they'll program a one size fits all. I was lucky enough to learn from people that program and do it in a very individualized way, but within the team setting. So, when you had Eric, he would program, sports or position specific additional exercises, or if you're a pitcher, you're doing this exercise. If you're an infielder or outfielder or whatever that might be, you're going to do this exercise instead. If you're a catcher, you have to do this mobility drill because you're sitting in a compromised position for, X amount of time. So I think that's one way that you can get as specific as you can for those very difficult times to specify it or to individualize it, is make it, here's what we're doing to develop you as an athlete, which is in my mind, yes, there's some sport specificity, but at the end of the day, we're trying to make you a better athlete, right? So we're trying to make you stronger. If you're trying to gain weight, we're going to try to help you gain that weight through muscle. We're trying to make you faster, more explosive, more agile. So you're going to have your meat and bones of what those components are that everybody has to do. Now there's some variations to those that, a pitcher might not catch a hang clean because he's putting more stress on a throwing limb or a wrist. And then where it gets more individualized is through periodization. And I know that's another term you're probably going to want an explanation for, but what that looks like is you periodize the intensity or the load. So the load that you actually lift. So if you're squatting, the load is the 100 pounds or 200 pounds that's on your back. You individualize that based on the person's personal records, their testing data, right? So you are going to squat something different at 70% of a 1 rep max than I would, because we may have different 1 rep maxes. So that intensity in training and volume in training is what's going to be the biggest individualized component. Is you're training at the intensity that's appropriate for your relative strength. And so I think that, in conjunction with a few of the switches in some of those positional aspects, and some of the, I guess, go back to the injury thing, doing some of the exercises that are going to help reduce, I never want to say prevent, but reduce injury in baseball, are going to be what's individualized per your position, specific to your sport, but then develop you as an athlete.
Yeah, because you're gonna have your core lifts that have been proven to work throughout time, right?
Yep.
Hinge, squat, deadlift, right? Those movements have been proven to literally make every person better, no matter what you're doing. Because every person has to get up and down off the ground, has to bend over, have to pick stuff up. And now, of course, you're looking in an athlete space, they have to do it with a little more intensity, a little bit more often. And so those core lifts, whatever they be, however they're modified for that specific sport, are always going to be there. And then what you're saying is, as you get into those accessory lifts, you can start to kind of dial in on the specific movement patterns or overhead stuff or rotational stuff of whatever that person or sport has for them.
For sure. Yeah, you just get more specific to the movements that are going to best replicate, for sure, 100%.
And then one of the most important parts, I think, of the programming for a strength and conditioning coach is the warm-up. Would you say?
For sure, yeah. You have to prep the body for it to perform at its max. And you do that through, increased blood flow, increased muscular temperature. But where you can also benefit from the warm-up is kind of the stuff that you do as far as your preventative or prehab, as it's often called, right? So a lot of those, you're almost kind of mimicking some of the accessories at a very low intensity to help give some more volume to protecting the overhead ability, right? Or to do some more of the upper body pulling exercises. So you can kind of focus a little bit more of your time in prepping the body, reducing injury through some of the motions you may need a little more volume on. But then a big component of it too is just the mental aspect of prepping the athlete for what they're going to be doing is another big part of it as well too. And understanding that, hey, you're essentially getting your body ready to, work out at a maximal level. Although you might not always be working at a maximal level, right? You're not always doing a 1 rep max. Whatever the focus is for that day, you can attack it with a a maximal effort. So if you're going for a lot of reps, right, then you can attack it because you're warm, you got the blood flowing. And if you're going for a 1 rep max, you've had the proper warm up to where your body, can account for that increased load. So I think from all spectrums, warm ups are super important. Cool downs are just as important, or making sure that you're taking care of your body outside of the resistance training or the lift per se, in areas that you may need more, that static stretching once the workout's done. The big component, and I know you know this, but for people that don't, is your warm-ups should never be static in nature, right? Like the static stretching hold for 2-3 minutes or whatever. That should be your cool down, or should be in portions outside of your workout where you need hamstring flexibility and you need hip flexibility. So cooling down and bringing the body back to equilibrium, but then doing some of those more specific flexibility movements are going to, help you increase range of motion. You increase range of motion, you can increase strength. You can increase strength in that range of motion. You're going to help reduce injury because you're strong throughout a full range of motion. So
exactly, yeah. And so to recap, right, you want to have this dynamic warm up, right, where you're moving your body, you're getting your blood flowing, there's a little bit of sweat going, it's not too intense, you're kind of prepping the body for movements you might be doing in the lift or that you do in your sport, whether that be basketball players learning how to land properly or whatever it may be, baseball players getting their rotator cuffs loose and internal rotators, external rotators, all of that stuff. And then you get into your actual lift where you're lifting with intensity, whatever the rep range might be and whatever the program is there. And then at the end, you want to have a cool down, and that's where kind of you're sitting in these positions for a little bit longer, whether that be a pigeon stretch, touching your toes, all of these things, you're sitting in a little bit deeper so you can cool down and then not just go straight into something else. Whatever you're doing, getting into your car, driving home for 45 minutes or, going to study if you happen to be in school. But, there's variables to everything. And sometimes we don't have time for all of that. But in the perfect world, in the perfect situation, if you have that time to do that, and then potentially doing some foam rolling and some stretching outside of that and all of that stuff and heat and all that, and ice baths, all those things play a part, of course. If you listen to Andrew Huberman's podcast, he talks about it all the time. But yeah, that was a quick recap of that.
For sure. Yeah, it's one of those deals, you only have so much time sometimes with certain people. And the more you can do on your own or teach somebody to do that on their own or outside, the more it's going to the performance increases or the general fit increases that you're doing during your workouts. So for sure.
And the beautiful thing that I found about exercise is that when you do actually stick to it, you can see tangible results pretty quickly, and so that's why it's really important. I do a lot of work in mental health, as you know, and that's an invisible field. It's what makes it really scary, but also it makes it so important to be proactive about it. And the mind and the body are interconnected, they're interlocked, they're joined together. And so when we do take care of our physical fitness and we start seeing these things that we can do more, we have more energy, we can play with our kids more, or we just look better, we feel better, that in turn helps our mental health. And so because this mental health thing is so invisible, it's nice to see physical health be this tangible thing that I can feel and see and people notice. And that's I don't know. I've always felt like that's a really important part of it.
For sure. They're intertwined. There's a huge realm. It's like you said, it's uncovered. And even in, coaching or strength conditioning or exercise science, we talk about it a little bit, but behavior change, right? Talk about behavior change and knowing that you need to make a change to start that change. But like you mentioned, it's so intertwined that, oftentimes people make the most change once they've been consistent in their, at least what I've seen, in their physical health, right? And they see that it makes you feel better, right? If you get your workout or run or whatever you're doing in at 6 a.m., you just feel great throughout the day, right? Or if you, like me, sometimes I'll work out, late in the evening, and it's a great time to relieve some stress, right? The weights don't care. You beat them up a little bit, So but the big part of that behavior change topic is a topic that's discussed a little bit, and in the coaching world is not is understood that it's there, but it's not understood fully and how that all ties together. And that's one area that some of the classes that I teach, I try to interject, is that behavior change is the big component on, a person's why, or what, helps them feel better about themselves, or what's going to help them have the autonomy to continue working out, or how working out is benefiting their mental health. And the biggest thing, consistency is the biggest thing in probably both those realms. And I don't know enough on the mental side to speak into it a whole lot, but consistency in your physical fitness is the only principle. Honestly, if you really sit down and think about it, you don't need to always lift 6-7 days a week. As long as you are consistent, you will at least maintain. And then there's going to be parts where you're going to get a little bit more involved. I'm speaking probably more from like a general fitness, not even in athletics anymore, because you have to work out whatever the strength coach tells you per week, right? But from a consistency standpoint in general fitness, in life that I've kind of experienced, and anymore with as busy as it gets, if I get 3 workouts in a week, like lifts in a week, I'm feeling pretty good about it. But I usually can always get 2. And then on weeks where I'm really busy, if I've gotten 1, but I've never not had a week go by where I at least haven't gotten 1 or 2. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I may have lost some here or there, but you get it back, and you get it back very quickly, but you maintain, right? And you maintain not only your physical health, but your mental health too, through however that benefits you. So.
Yeah, it's simply that feelings follow behavior. And
sure,
you want to be able to stick to your protocols, whatever they be, whatever your habits, whatever your mental health toolkit or your physical toolkit is. You want to be able to stick to those protocols when you feel your worst, so that that you can fall on these things when you don't start to feel great. And you're like, okay, I know I have this, and this, and this, and this I can do that I know will make me feel better, even though I don't feel like doing it right now. It will make me feel better in the long run. So I kind of have to force myself to do it.
for sure.
And little do you know that feelings follow behavior. And now you started this you've got momentum going. Now you're moving in the right direction, and boom, there you go. So that's what I think.
For sure. No, you hit it on the head.
But it is a little bit past 2:30, and you do have to go.
I got time for one more question. If you got another question for me.
Oh, I got the final question, Seth.
Okay.
I got it.
Oh, I wasn't prepared. There was a final question?
Yes. I stole it from one of my favorite podcasters. If you listen to him, his name's Tim Ferriss. He's got an amazing podcast. He doesn't need my promotion. He's got 1 million listeners. but anyways, he asked this question to all of his guests at the end, and I think it's a really powerful question. So I'm going to ask you, Seth, if you could put a billboard up in the middle of Sioux Falls and everyone who drove by it would see it. So we'll say millions of people throughout the year, right? What would you put on that billboard?
Ooh. To be honest, the first thing that came to mind, without thinking about this too long and keeping a weird, awkward silence here, is probably be kind. I put, as simple as that sounds, I'd put literally, if I could have the biggest one in Sioux Falls, the brightest lights, I'd literally would put 2 words: be kind. And I think, I'm not a big social media guy. I mean, I rarely post and, that sort of thing. But from, knowing people that, are on social media, and where, you hear some people talk about how that's kind of escalated, people can sit behind a screen and not be kind and whatnot. And just the general state of where I think a lot of people understand where we're at in society is just be kind to people. Mm-hmm. Be kind to people, understand that they also have, their own lives to live and their own situations that they're going through that look much like what we all have, and just be kind.
I love it. I mean, I think everyone who listens to this podcast knows that my billboard would be 3 words. It'd be "you are loved." So be kind. There we go. Got the wristband
on my wrist.
My man. So be kind is a beautiful one. And it's true, right? Everyone, from my experience working with people, everyone has something going on that nobody knows about. Everyone is just trying to figure it out, and everyone is just trying to do the best they can. If you can hold those 3 things in the back of your head when you're just going about your life, there's no way that you won't be just a little bit kinder to someone's situation. And so I think that's a beautiful billboard. And I think that's the perfect place to stop for now.
So the one last thing I'll say on that, and this was kind of maybe a challenge for everybody listening, but with the you are loved and the be kind, that whole side of it, right? Like I can almost guarantee you, and I do this a lot, and I kind of like, you step back and like, oh man, like, okay, I do feel better. If you're ever having a bad day, right? Or you're ever just like, you're not in a good mood or whatever that situation might be, do something kind for somebody else. And I guarantee you it will turn your day around. Like as little as like literally opening up a door for somebody and they kind of give you a smile like, oh geez, like that person, you know, helped me out when they didn't have to, or like whatever it is, as little as it is, I will almost guarantee 100% it will turn your day around for sure. And that's how I try to live.
Absolutely. 100%. And those little kind things that we do for people, sometimes we have no idea how big the impact was, but we do it because that makes the world a better place. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So
100% for sure.
Well, thank you, Seth. I appreciate you coming on. We need to do another one. So when I get to like episode 200, you can come back on.
All right, I'll do that. Yeah, we can get a little deeper into, I feel like some of the strength stuff we kind of moved through quick, but I would love to do that. Thank you for having me. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing, man. I love, like I said, I love what you're doing. And we got I was going to wear the t-shirt. I forgot the t-shirt, but we got t-shirts, and it's a big, I think what you're doing is making a big impact. And so thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That means a lot to me. It really does. So, yeah, we'll get you back on. This is episode 97 with my friend Seth Daughters. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Share this with a friend. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And just come back every Tuesday because I really appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. It's a great deal for me. We're getting closer to episode 100. So thanks for tuning in. And see you next time. Cheers.